There's a moment, just before sleep, when the body softens and the mind opens its gate. You might not notice it, but your breath changes. Your thoughts stop resisting. Your defenses dissolve. And in that sacred window, the door to your subconscious swings wide. Silently, completely, and without filters. It doesn't argue. It doesn't question. It simply receives. This is the hour when seeds become roots. And yet most people fall asleep with mental clutter, spiritual noise, or hollow affirmations playing in the background, hoping that proximity to wisdom will produce transformation. But the subconscious is not moved by noise. It's moved by feeling. It doesn't remember what you heard. It remembers what you felt when you heard it. Neville Goddard said the subconscious is most receptive during states of drowsiness and sleep, not because it's fragile, but because it's undefended. In those moments, you're no longer pretending to believe. You're no longer trying to manifest. You are simply open, and what you're open to becomes you. But here's the hidden danger. If you fall asleep to teachings while your heart still vibrates with fear, with doubt, with hunger for what you think you don't have, then the teaching enters as contradiction. And contradiction doesn't manifest creation. It manifests confusion. Dr. Bruce Lipton reminds us that 95% of our day is driven by the subconscious mind, that this powerful system was programmed mostly in the first 7 years of life. And again, every time we slip into theta brainwave states like the edge of sleep. So when you drift off at night, you're not just resting, you're coding, you're imprinting, you're updating the software that runs your reality. And yet, how many nights have you laid down feeling broken, feeling small, hoping that the next audio, the next voice, the next guru might finally rewire your life for abundance, but you wake up the same. The lack returns, the doubts echo, the mirror still reflects an identity of almost, not because you're not trying, but because you're not aware of what's truly being installed. Imagine your mind as a sacred cathedral. All day, thoughts walk in and out, lighting candles or blowing them out. But at night, the workers come, in silence. They take whatever you've left on the altar and they build it into the architecture of your belief. Every word, every emotion, every feeling you surrendered to before sleep becomes part of your inner cathedral walls. So the question is not, did you listen to truth before bed? The real question is, what did you feel while listening? Because sleep does not sanctify what you hear, it magnifies what you accept. And if what you accept is that you still need to heal, still need to become, still need to earn what you desire, then the subconscious obeys, not out of punishment, but out of precision. Your reality is not the product of your effort, it's the reflection of your inner agreement. And those agreements are whispered at the edge of night. Tonight, you get to choose what remains on the altar. You get to choose what the workers of your subconscious will build. Is it another blueprint of lack disguised as spiritual hunger? Or is it the silent, undeniable knowing that it is already yours, that you already are, that it is already done? What you hear isn't always what you absorb. There is a silence that deceives. It's the quiet of your body lying in bed, headphones in, eyes closed, while a voice speaks about abundance, worth, creation, and yet, somewhere beneath that surface calm, a subtle war brews. Because the words you hear and the emotions you hold do not match. You want to receive truth, but you fall asleep still doubting it. And in this gap, the sabotage begins. Not loudly, but gently, invisibly. The subconscious does not need volume. It only needs emotion. And when the emotion carried into sleep is fear or lack or the low hum of not enough, that is what gets absorbed. Neville never taught the law as a concept to be memorized. He taught it as a state to be entered. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is not an idea, it's an inner condition. It must be felt in the body like gravity. And that feeling, more than any audio, affirmation, or visualization, is what the subconscious recognizes as instruction. So when you fall asleep while consuming spiritual content, but your identity is still rooted in hope and separation, you feed the mind mixed signals. You give it data instead of direction. And the subconscious doesn't argue. It simply installs what was dominant. So if the voice in your headphones says you are infinite, but your inner voice whispers, I'm still waiting, the inner voice wins. Every time. Because it has emotion. It has roots. The practice is not to stop listening before bed. The practice is to pause before the audio begins, to sit with yourself just for 5 minutes, and anchor your identity in the present tense of your wish fulfilled. This is not about performance. It's about coherence. The subconscious listens to what you feel more than what you say. So speak not just with words, but with presence, with tone, with breath. Say one sentence that defines your new self, and feel it settle. Let your body wear it like skin. Then, and only then, let the teachings play. Because now you're not receiving them as a seeker. You're receiving them as the one who already is. You're no longer blending mental passivity with spiritual noise. You're initiating the night as a ritual, not a routine. And in that shift, from consumption to embodiment, your sleep becomes sacred again. Theta is the manifestation frequency you're misusing. There's a frequency beneath your thoughts, a rhythm that emerges when the world fades, and the veil between conscious and subconscious thins. This is theta, not just a brainwave, but a doorway, a vibrational corridor that leads directly to the deepest layers of identity. It's the state children live in during their earliest years, the state where beliefs are absorbed as truth, no questions asked. It's also the state you enter each night, right before sleep carries you away. Most people pass through this theta gate with no awareness. They bring their worry with them. They bring their scrolling, their distractions, their spiritual content played out of habit. But the subconscious doesn't recognize what you're listening to. It recognizes how you feel while listening. So if you fall asleep to a voice affirming your power, but inside you feel doubt, the frequency registers doubt. And theta, like a loyal scribe, records it as command. This is why listening passively can become a cycle of stagnation. You hear the words, but without emotional context, your subconscious doesn't know what to do with them. It reverts to what it knows: repetition. And repetition without presence becomes reinforcement of the same identity. Not because you aren't trying hard enough, but because you're not programming from the right source. Emotion is the code, and you're sending mixed signals. Imagine recording your own voice, not the voice of a teacher or a stranger, but your voice filled with conviction, speaking to yourself from the future, from the version of you that already is, that already has, that already knows. This isn't performance, it's imprinting. When you hear yourself say, "I live in overflow, my life reflects my inner wholeness," and you feel it as truth even just for a few seconds, you activate alignment. The subconscious hears that as reality, because theta doesn't care about volume. It cares about vibration. It responds to coherence. And coherence means what you say, what you feel, and who you believe you are match. So what are you programming as you fall asleep? Are you replaying neutrality, hoping repetition will be enough? Or are you imprinting identity with intention? Because theta is always listening. The question is, are you speaking from who you were, or from who you've already become? There's a belief floating quietly through the spiritual world that if you repeat something long enough, it will become real. That if you say the words with enough frequency, reality will catch up. But repetition without emotion is like carving words into water. It moves, it ripples, but it never stays. And worse, it can become noise, an echo chamber of spiritual phrases that sound beautiful, but do not shift your inner state. Neville never told us to repeat affirmations mindlessly. He told us to feel them into being, to dwell in the end. Because the subconscious doesn't respond to the number of times you say something. It responds to the emotional identity you carry while saying it. If you repeat "I am abundant" with a clenched heart, with the silent desperation of someone hoping to escape lack, then the dominant vibration is still lack. And that is what gets installed. Psychology calls it the Galatea effect. What you believe about yourself shapes your outcomes more than any external influence. But here's the nuance most people miss. Belief is not thought. Belief is emotional agreement. It is the body saying, "This is who I am," even when evidence is absent. So when you fall asleep with affirmations looping in the background but you don't believe them, when they feel like reaching instead of remembering, you're not reprogramming. You're rehearsing a script that your soul doesn't yet own. And the subconscious, ever faithful, does not rebel. It does not analyze. It simply asks, "Is this what we are?" And it answers based on the tone beneath your words, not the words themselves. Repetition is not the enemy, But repetition without identity is like a key with no lock. It moves, but it doesn't open. When you pair repetition with emotion, when the sentence you speak carries the energy of embodiment, then the code enters. Then the subconscious listens with reverence. Because now it's not being asked to believe, it's being shown who you are. So ask not, have I repeated it enough? Ask instead, did I feel it once with the certainty of someone who no longer doubts? Because one moment of true identity emotion is more powerful than 1,000 hollow repetitions. The subconscious remembers feeling, it remembers coherence, and it obeys the identity that feels most real. Make sure the one you repeat is the one you've already become. Before we move on, pause with me for a moment. If part of you feels like something invisible has been blocking your manifestation, if you've been doing everything right, but still waking up in the same emotional frequency, there's something waiting for you in the pinned comment. Not more information, but a key, a shift. Check it when you're ready to feel differently about who you truly are, especially at night, when your power speaks the loudest in silence. There's a silence that enters just before sleep, a silence that isn't peaceful but hollow, an emotional vacuum, and most people mistake it for calm. They lie in bed, tired from a long day of trying, thinking they've earned rest. But underneath the quiet, there's still a vibration of longing, of lack, of something not yet fulfilled. And when that is the final frequency felt before sleep, that is the seed the subconscious takes into the soil of the night. You may have spent your entire day consuming wisdom, meditating, affirming, visualizing. But if you carry unresolved frustration, quiet comparison, or even subtle doubt into those last minutes before sleep, that's what your body absorbs. That's what your subconscious holds on to. And that is what becomes your dominant signal. Neville spoke of the state akin to sleep, not as a method, but as a sacred condition, a portal where you no longer effort, where you no longer chase, but simply assume. It's the space where the imagination must not only be active, it must be final. And yet, most people fall asleep thinking of what they still need to become, instead of resting in who they already are. And the subconscious, always obedient, records the message. I am still waiting. I am still trying. I am still incomplete. This is why so many wake up with the same heaviness they carried the night before, the same emotional blueprint. Because the vacuum before sleep didn't get filled with the feeling of fulfillment. It got filled with the echo of delay. To reverse this, you must let the body become the new script, not with effort, but with a soft, imaginal scene that implies it is already done. Not a scene of achievement, not of applause or reward, but something quiet, something natural, like seeing yourself making breakfast in the kitchen you love, with the sun pouring in and no thought of struggle. Or feeling the hand of the one you love resting gently on yours, not as a dream but as a memory. This is the imaginal scene lock-in, a rehearsal of fulfillment so subtle the subconscious believes it's already happened. Because in its language, time is irrelevant. Only emotional certainty matters. You do not need to convince it. You only need to feel long enough for it to agree. And so the vacuum is no longer filled with hunger. It's filled with peace, with completion, with the end already lived. And in that feeling, sleep becomes a womb, a place where new realities are not wished for, they are born. There's a quiet trap hidden in the path of seekers. It doesn't scream. It doesn't look like resistance. In fact, it often looks like devotion. It sounds like hours of teachings, playlists of affirmations, endless streams of enlightenment audio playing in the background of daily life. But the trap is not in the content. It's in the posture. It's in the quiet assumption that proximity to wisdom is the same as transformation. But the subconscious does not evolve through proximity. It evolves through personal emotional imprinting, through intimacy with belief, through lived resonance. Not what you hear, but what you claim as yours in silence. And when spirituality becomes passive, when it's consumed like background music, it stops being a portal. It becomes a loop. There are people who have listened to thousands of hours of spiritual content, who can quote Neville Dispenza Florence, but still wake up feeling behind, still carry the same inner resistance, the same identity of seeking without finding. Not because the teachings lack power, but because their absorption has not been sacred, it's been habitual. Passive spirituality creates the illusion of movement while keeping you circling the same inner identity. It's a vibrational contradiction, the desire to shift, anchored in the belief that something outside must first complete you. This is not judgment. It's a tender mirror. You've been trying. You've been reaching. You've been pouring time and energy into awakening. But you're not wrong for still feeling stuck. You're just being invited deeper, into intimacy with what you already are, into silence with your own frequency, into authorship of your own voice. Because true transformation is not something you listen to. It's something you become from within. And the shift begins when you stop using wisdom as noise and begin letting it pass through your emotional body. When you feel each sentence not as new information, but as familiar truth. When you listen not to gather more, but to remember what you already know. Then, the loop breaks. Then, the subconscious stops absorbing contradiction and begins reflecting coherence. Then the teachings become mirrors, not maps. And you, no longer the seeker, but the source, turn night into sacred practice. There's a difference between falling asleep and surrendering into sleep. One is unconscious, the other is ceremonial. And most people give 90% of their energy to healing by day, but almost nothing to their subconscious programming by night, as if the most powerful hours of recreation are just a pause between chapters, not a ritual of redefinition. But your subconscious doesn't clock out. It listens in the silence. It accepts what you feel, not what you plan. And if the final emotion before sleep is emptiness, confusion, or the silent ache of still not there, that becomes the anchoring vibration, not by punishment, but by design. Because your inner mind does not judge what you feel, it replicates it. Imagine, instead, turning your night into sanctuary, not with effort, but with devotion, a single sentence, spoken aloud, not as a technique, but as a truth, a declaration so alive in you it carries weight in your chest. I am the source of increase, or everything I touch becomes whole, not as hope, but as memory, as identity. This is emotional anchoring. It's not about loud affirmations or perfect language. It's about the tone in your voice when you say them, the breath you exhale after, the stillness that follows. Because that stillness is where the imprint happens. That stillness is the temple. And in that space, your subconscious doesn't hear theory. It hears certainty. It hears, this is who I am now. And it goes to work, not because you forced it, but because you felt it long enough for the inner switch to flip. This isn't about doing more. It's about choosing more consciously, giving your final moments of the day the weight they deserve, not rushing into sleep, but arriving at it as a sacred threshold, where identity is whispered, where vibration is seeded, where the next version of you is already unfolding, quietly, faithfully, from the inside out. Sleep is sacred, but many unknowingly turn it into chaos. A mix of frequencies, voices, affirmations, meditations, all layered into the night, as if the more you absorb, the faster you will transform. But the subconscious is not a collector. It is an integrator, and when it receives conflicting instructions, it does not rise in clarity. It collapses in confusion. Imagine building a castle, but every night you change the blueprint. One night you program wealth, the next, healing, then confidence, then detachment, all beautiful, all powerful, but each one drawn from a different foundation. And before the walls are stable, the blueprint changes again, and so the structure never holds. The subconscious, without consistency, returns to the only thing it knows, the familiar, the old identity. This is not because your desire is weak. It's because the signal is divided. Your intention is not being rejected, it's being scattered. The subconscious needs repetition, yes, but more than that, it needs congruence. It needs simplicity. It needs a single thread pulled again and again until the fabric of a new identity is woven. Choose one theme, not for one night, but for 21. Let your sleep become a temple of alignment. Let each night layer the same emotional truth until the subconscious no longer questions it. Until it says, this is who we are now. You don't need more input. You need unified vibration. You need a single sentence that holds your entire new world inside it. A sentence that doesn't try to fix you but reflects who you've already decided to become. And then, let that sentence become your altar. Let it echo through the chambers of your night until it's not just a thought but your foundation. In this quiet consistency, the subconscious relaxes. It stops scanning. It starts building, not from fragments, but from the full shape of your chosen self. And what you wake up to will finally match what you've been sowing in silence. You fall asleep with words of truth in your ears, teachings on manifestation, wealth, healing. But you wake up feeling the same, heavy, repeating the same emotional loops, the same inner narrative, and you wonder why it's not working, why all the content, the hours of listening, the affirmations, haven't dissolved the weight inside. But what if the ears are open, while the emotional body remains unchanged? The subconscious does not respond to volume. It responds to repetition of emotion. And here lies the hidden mechanism. Your dopamine system, your emotional reward loop, does not reinforce what is true. It reinforces what is familiar. So even if you fall asleep to spiritual truths, your body will recreate the emotional state it knows best. Not because it is loyal to pain, but because it has not yet learned the feeling of something new. This is the empty ears, full mind phenomenon, a state where you're inputting wisdom, but still running the same emotional operating system. You're listening to higher frequencies, but your nervous system is tuned to the past, the fear, the lack, the deep-rooted identity of almost, but not yet. So instead of just feeding your mind with new information, invite your body into the process. Make your emotional state part of the ritual. Anchor the future in your cells, not just your ears. Right before sleep, not long pages, just a few sentences from your future self. Not what you wish to have, but how you feel, living in the life that's already done. Let your hand remember what it feels like to belong to that version of you. I woke up feeling peace in my chest. Today, everything came with ease. I felt no urgency, because it's already mine. This writing is not a tool, it's a signal, a soft rebellion against the emotional inertia of your old self. And when you do this, not just once, but with devotion, your body starts to learn the new. The subconscious begins to trust the unfamiliar, and the content you've been hearing finally finds a place to land, a home, in you. There's a moment before you fall asleep that most overlook, a flicker of stillness, a closing breath, a subtle exhale where your inner world makes a final imprint. And whatever you carry in that moment, whatever image, whatever emotion, whatever identity, you give to the subconscious as a seed. And it doesn't question the seed, it plants it. Neville called this the most fertile moment for creation. The last thought before sleep is not just an echo, it's a blueprint. It becomes the reference point your subconscious returns to, again and again, as it navigates the dream of your reality. And yet, most people surrender this moment to habit, to scrolling, to worry, to the replay of a conversation, or the pressure of what tomorrow might demand. But what if, instead of letting the last scene be random, you made it sacred? What if, every night, you chose a 10-second frame, one imaginal moment that implies it is already done? Not a fantasy, not a wish, but a scene so ordinary, so grounded, that your subconscious says, yes, this feels real. A simple detail, you brushing your teeth in your dream home, checking your calendar, full of aligned opportunities, looking at your partner with the soft knowing that love is no longer something you seek, it's something you live. These final images are not about excitement, they're about believability, they're about coherence, because the subconscious doesn't need fireworks. It needs familiarity. It needs a moment that already belongs to you. This is the final frame focus, a ritual that doesn't require effort, only choice. You choose what the night will echo. You choose what the subconscious will cradle as truth. And over time, these 10-second scenes become more than imagination. They become home, and your reality, shaped by the quiet power of nightly surrender, begins to shift, not through force, but through repetition of inner certainty, because what you feel before you sleep becomes the tone of what you wake up to. Always. You go to sleep listening to abundance teachings, hoping that something will click, that maybe while you sleep a shift will happen, that the affirmations will soak in, that the words will rearrange your reality. But you wake up, and the old feeling returns, the heaviness, the doubt, the undercurrent of still not enough, and it begins again. But what if the issue isn't the content you're listening to, but the energy with which you approach it? When you fall asleep using spiritual teachings as a remedy for lack, you're unknowingly confirming to your subconscious that you are still lacking, that something is missing, that you must still fix, heal, or chase something. And the subconscious, ever obedient, doesn't decode your intention. It simply accepts your emotional state as instruction. This is why it's possible to fall asleep with positive input, but wake up anchored in the same scarcity, because you weren't feeding your identity, you were feeding your hope. And hope, while beautiful, still lives in the vibration of not yet. Neville never taught hope. He taught assumption. The law of assumption is not a technique. It's a state, a knowing, a quiet, unmoved beingness that says, it is already done. Not because of what you hear, but because of what you are. The subconscious does not respond to hope. It responds to identity. It does not calibrate to your desires. It calibrates to your emotional truth. And if your emotional truth is, I need this to work, then that need becomes the dominant frequency. Not the desire, not the words, the need. But when you go to sleep with the vibration of completion, not as a fantasy, but as a choice, everything begins to shift. When you say, it's already mine, and let that feeling relax your nervous system, your subconscious accepts it, not because it was loud, but because it was embodied. And so, the answer is not to sleep with more strategies. It's to sleep with more truth. Not the truth of what you want, the truth of who you are now. You are not waiting to become. You are remembering what has always been within reach. And in that remembering, the morning becomes new, not because of the night's content, but because of the night's conviction. Sleep is a ritual. Stop treating it like a routine. Sleep is not just rest. It is not simply the body collapsing into darkness at the end of a long day. Sleep is entrance. It is initiation, a sacred return to the invisible space where the seeds of your reality are planted without resistance, where the subconscious, the keeper of your identity, your patterns, your deepest truths, stands open, receptive, waiting for instruction. And yet most people meet this portal with casual disregard. They enter it hurried, distracted, drained, falling into unconsciousness while holding thoughts of worry, regret, or vague hope that something they listen to will do the work for them. But the subconscious is not changed by effort. It is shaped by devotion. And there is no moment more devotional than the final moments before sleep. Neville Goddard called this the most fertile soil of the mind, the space where assumption takes root without effort, where the feeling you surrender to becomes law, not in metaphor, in experience. Because your subconscious is the architect of your lived reality. It takes what you believe about yourself, especially in that drowsy, unguarded space, and builds a world around it. Bruce Lipton expands this truth through biology. He explains that your body, your chemistry, your responses, your decisions, follows your perception, and perception is not formed in the conscious mind. It is programmed through repetition and emotion, especially in altered states like theta, which naturally arise as you drift into sleep. So every night, whether you realize it or not, you are reprogramming. The only question is, what frequency are you repeating? What emotion are you surrendering to? If it's fear, the body remembers fear. If it's lack, the subconscious carries that forward as identity. And even if you play the most powerful teachings in the background, if you are emotionally anchored in separation, in the quiet ache of not yet, the message the subconscious receives is one of delay, one of distance, one that says, I still need, I still hope, I still don't believe. This is why sleep must be reclaimed, not as a passive pause, but as a sacred ceremony, a moment of vibrational authorship, where you no longer wait for transformation, you become the one who transforms, where the final breath of the day becomes an offering, not of need, but of wholeness, not of struggle, but of silent knowing. Treat your bed like an altar. Let your final thought be chosen, not inherited from the noise of the day. Let your last feeling before sleep be one of completion, of gratitude, of identity fulfilled, not because everything has changed in the outer world, but because everything has aligned in the inner one. You are not falling asleep anymore. You are crossing into creation. The world you meet in the morning is a mirror of what you allowed in the night. So choose consciously. Enter reverently. Because if your body is the temple, then yes, your sleep is the altar, and you are the one who decides what prays there. Let it be peace. Let it be abundance. Let it be done. Sleep is not a closing. It is an opening. A space where reality is rewritten not by what you try to force, but by what you finally allow. And what you allow becomes who you are. Let that truth meet you tonight, not as a concept, but as a quiet presence. And before you close your eyes, there's something waiting just below this video. Something chosen with the same intention as every word you've just felt. Pause for a moment. Check the pinned comment. See what calls your name in silence.